Oh my goodness, friends. What an incredible game came out yesterday at the tournament I'm playing in person. When I finished the game, I said, I have to bring this to my followers right away because they're going to be blown away. My opponent really played a phenomenal and impressive game, as you are about to see for yourself. However, in the end, we pulled off a clever and unexpected little strategic trick to win the game. You are absolutely going to love it. I started with the white pieces with e4. This was a classical game, an hour and a half for each side. All right, and my opponent played double king's pawn, telling me something. Hey, I'm not afraid of you knowing theory. You know that when someone plays double king's pawn with black, they're saying, play whatever you want. I'm going to know the theory. So now I continued with knight to f3, knight to c6, and I thought, now what do I do? The reality of the situation is she was a dedicated student of the game of chess, meaning her studies were still very fresh in her mind, and I found myself entangled in a complicated mess that I probably shouldn't have gotten into. I started playing the Scotch Gambit, one of my favorites. I've brought it to the channel 1,000 times. Of course, maybe my reasoning wasn't that great, right? If it's a younger individual who spends a significant amount of time studying chess, probably if I go into such a theoretical line, there's a very high probability she knows it all by heart. And of course, my opponent didn't disappoint. She started with bishop to c5, which seemed really good for me. I thought, okay, at least she didn't play knight to f6, which is the most critical move in this position. However, after bishop to c6, here the move is c3, waiting for them to capture this pawn so we can sacrifice our bishop on f7, and after king takes on f7. Queen to d5, recovering the bishop and all that, right? However, my opponent didn't hesitate for a second to play the best move in the position, knight to f6. It is certainly true that she didn't play it immediately at that specific moment, but she does it now, which is a strategically advantageous and beneficial move. Logically, if she decides to move away now, she will find herself in an extremely precarious and disadvantageous position. For example, if she decides to transition her piece over to this area, I could simply play queen to e2, or I could even recapture this pawn and I'd be in a really great position. The idea is that here there's only one correct move for black, which is d5, allowing the knight to be captured, and then I, or rather my opponent, will capture my bishop. When I saw this, I thought my opponent knows the theory extremely well. And what should you do when your opponent knows the theory really well? Well, look, I thought I'm going to get out of theory. Let's see if I can catch him off guard here. Here, the theoretical move, my friends, is to place the bishop on b5. It's the best move in this position. However, I wanted to do the following. I'm going to take the knight while my opponent takes my bishop. And just like that, we're completely out of theory. Careful. At this point, I was aware that this wasn't the main line. You already know that on this channel we've talked about the Scotch Gambit 1,000 times, and we know it extremely well. So probably now, if I play this again, I'm never going into this line ever again. You're about to see how this girl put the pressure on me. The idea is that here, I probably shouldn't have captured on g7, but I did. Of course, in my head, it sounded great. I successfully managed to advance a pawn to the g7 square, and if anything happens, I can provide solid defense for it with my bishop currently positioned on h6. It is always going to be extremely close to the point of queenie. However, my opponent, oh man, she was a real force to be reckoned with. She knew all the tricks. Here, she has two good moves. Rook to g8 is obviously good, and also queen to e7, giving this check first. This one is even more subtle because it forces us to play extremely well. Of course, here I paused for a moment because I thought I've never reached this position in my life. I'm gonna have to think about what the best move is here. This is what happened next. Let's see, Chessteacher. Here you have a very strange move, but if it works, you've already won the game. You have to consider what happens if you put the king on d2. Don't worry, I didn't do it because it's not a good idea, but of course, look at what happens. I threaten the rook, and I threaten rook to wand. That is, if there aren't enough checks here, I either take the rook or I take the queen, one of the two. However, it doesn't work because after pawn takes, the queen could come in to give checks, then the bishop, and that would be extremely dangerous for us. Obviously, it's not a good option. The engine suggests king to f1 as the first option, something I don't really like, right? I really don't like queen to e2 at all, because after the exchanges and then when they move the rook away, or whenever they want, they can push this pawn to d3 with check, and they'll have a super strong passed pawn on d3. They could even play bishop to g4. To pin this knight, and my chances of winning here are looking pretty grim, right? So here I say, look, I'm going to play the calm move bishop to e3, which looks like I'm giving away the bishop. But no, my friends, I'm not giving away the bishop, because if they take it, I would capture the rook, promoting to a queen and giving check. You see? So no, they can't take my bishop. They have to move the rook away. And when they move the rook, I have time to capture this pawn. And this is the line I went into. I have an extra pawn, but that's not really true, because they'll get back this pawn on g7 whenever they want, or rather, whenever my opponent lies. I'm threatening the bishop. Logically, here, the best move is bishop to b4, giving a check to the king. A block with the knight, and now they do get the pawn back. So, we are on a completely equal playing field. An exceptionally well-balanced game. Here I spent a while thinking. And I said, well, what am I going to do here? I played d5, threatening his knight. Looks pretty good, right? Sure, but what do I do? Do I leave my king in the center the whole game? I'm telling you what was going through my head. This is excellent, because nobody in the world knows what I was thinking at this moment. Understand what I was thinking in the game. I can't leave my king centered, but if I castle, I'm walking right into the lion's den with the rook on the g-file. I must be careful. If I don't castle, I need to do something as my opponent captures my pawn on g2. Let me calculate. What happens if I castle? Well, if I castle, I quickly rule it out because they hit me with bishop to h3, right? And they're attacking the g2 square. This looks really dangerous. And then I thought, okay, Chessteacher, calculate a bit more. If I castle and they play bishop to h, I couldn't play bishop to g then. This way, I'm cutting off the rook's line. I'm threatening the queen, I'm threatening the bishop, and since I'm castled, I have the rook on f1. I can play rook to f1 check, or rather pinning the queen, and I take the queen. So I thought it's not so dangerous to castle, because whenever they try to come in and do damage, you can play the bishop to g5, cutting off the diagonal, defended by the knight, and I create a lot of threats. So I said, well, I'll castle. You know what? If you check with your friends, the computers, here bishop to h3 is an excellent move. The truth is, I hadn't calculated that far, but if bishop h3 and I play bishop g5, they can sacrifice the rook without a problem, because it's a brilliant move. After knight takes, queen takes, I'm going to have to play something like g3 after rook e1, and the position will be better for the black pieces. However, this calculation was extremely deep, and it was really scary playing as black. No doubt, bringing this bishop to h3, because after bishop g5, I'm also hitting you with rook e1, pinning the queen and all that, right? When we compare our game to the engines are always absolutely right, but it's never that easy, is it? So here, my opponent decides, I think wisely, to first get rid of this knight, because this knight is jumping in to attack the queen. It's jumping to c7 to win with a fork. My opponent brilliantly realizes that my knight is much stronger than his bishop on b4, so we exchange here first. And now what my opponent does is queen to f6. It's definitely not the best move in this position. The best move is probably bishop to h3, right? To get the bishop out quickly and be able to castle long and all that. And, well, he starts putting direct pressure on this knight, which you'll see is pretty crucial. Obviously, I can't move the queen because this knight would fall. The g-pawn is pinned. Look at how powerful this rook is on g7. So here I thought for a while and came to a conclusion. My main move was rook to e1. After rook to e1, my opponent pretty much had to play knight to e7, because otherwise I was threatening discovered attacks with the bishop, right? So I was calculating rook to e1, knight to e7, and then I didn't know how to continue. And then I thought, what if I play d5? If knight to e7, I play bishop to d4 and win the rook. Great, so d5 looks really weird. He can't go to e7 because I win the rook. He can't go to e5 because I trade knights and win the rook again. So what does he do with his knight? He can't get out of here. This is what I was thinking in my head. If I play d5, he loses the knight. But of course, he has other moves, right? Let's consider all the in-between moves. Look at how much calculation this game has. d5, if he can't move the knight away, then he has to make a stronger threat. For example, queen to g6, threatening mate. But of course, if d5 and queen g6, I play knight to h4. Do you see this? If d5 and queen g6, I play knight h4, and this is a winning position for me. Because he has to move the queen away, then I take the knight, right? If, for example, queen to g4, threatening my knight, I take his, and when he takes mine, I can play rook e1 or queen e2. Either one really works here. It's a wonderful position for white. Therefore, d5 seemed like an excellent move to me, and I play d5. My opponent starts thinking deeply and thinking, and do you know what happened next? While he was thinking, I started to get nervous, because I actually thought to myself, here, Chessteacher, there's something you've missed. Mainly, I'm seeing two moves that slip past you. The first one I saw is, what happens if now he plays bishop to h3? I ignored this threat because I was threatening the knight, but this is really strong. In this case, bishop to h3 was a good move, and even though here I could still defend well with this bishop to g5, now it really is a good move. I wasn't so sure about it before. And then while I was thinking, I said, well, if he plays bishop to h3, I'll play bishop to g5, and nothing happens here. Calm down, and then I thought, okay, chess teacher, what if he plays bishop to g4? This move is a bomb, and my opponent moves his hand like this, and I think, uh-oh, he's going to play bishop to g4, you'll see. I was hoping he'd play bishop to h3 because then I have this move, but my opponent goes, boom, bishop to g4. Look at the impact of this move because it's tremendous. He's threatening my knight, but I can't defend it in any way. I can't move it away because he takes my queen, and I can't defend it with any piece. Pay attention because he's threatening bishop takes, and if queen takes, then queen takes. Because this pawn is completely pinned. So here I say, okay, Chester, now what do? You can't do anything. I considered bishop to d4, attacking the queen. If he takes my knight, I take his queen. If he takes my queen, I take his rook. I'm fine with this line. I'll play bishop to d4. But what if he takes with the knight? Well, then I take with the queen, threaten his queen, and if he takes here, we trade. If he takes here, he loses his queen. And what happened is that I didn't like this because I saw a line that I really didn't like at all, and the line was the following. If bishop here, when you're calculating a line, if there's one you already don't like, I wouldn't go for it. So I saw one I did not like, which was this. If bishop to d4, knight takes, queen takes. And now what I didn't like was that if bishop takes, giving up the queen. After queen takes, there comes rook takes on g2 with check. The king has to move, and then they hit me with the windmill. Do you know what the windmill is? When the bishop is here, the rook here, and the king can only go here. So they had a guaranteed draw. And not only that, but they could also move the queen. The rook would check, take my queen. You can check all this yourself on your board. And I also recommend that you calculate everything I'm telling you on your own board, because that way you'll learn a lot from your games. So I say, chess teacher, if the bishop e4 variation doesn't work for you, which actually did work in the end, because there was a rook to e1 check in the middle that saved me. But of course, calculating all of this is practically impossible, right? So what do? And then it occurred to me, king to h1. I thought this solves all my problems. King to h1, if they capture here, I simply recapture with the pawn. Now I don't have the pen anymore. Nothing happens to me here anymore. King to h1, and I'm safe from everything. Now if my opponent moved the knight, I hit him with this. Well, we'll see what I do, because I don't really like it. I was thinking of playing bishop to e4, right? But my opponent, very wisely, plays the following move. Long castle. Man, this opponent is tough. My goodness, she's good. With long castle, I can't capture the knight because the queen would take me. So now, what do I do here? Because, of course, it's true that my position, I'm not lost. Obviously, I'm not lost, but she's the one attacking. I'm not doing anything. I mean, I really don't like this position at all. I have to somehow create some kind of counterplay. If I put the bishop back on d4 now, I do not like it, because after bishop to d4, simply after the exchanges, she is eventually going to capture the d5 pawn with the rook, and I will be left a pawn down in an endgame where I can pretty much do nothing. So I say, look, knowing that I'm really worse here, when you're in a worse position, you should try to look for some kind of counterplay. Why? Because it's very hard to play perfectly, and even though the engines say the position is worse, I play b1. Try to look for tactical ideas around the b7 square. I love calculating, so if at any moment a tactical idea comes up, for example, rook takes on b7, just imagine that now. Imagine this. The queen is defending this rook, but imagine they play d6 to come and attack. If the queen stops defending this rook, I can start thinking about rook to b7. King takes, pawn takes with check, and the king would have to go back to defend the rook. So when the king goes back, there are probably more tactical ideas, right? But of course, this is already fireworks, right? Let's see what happens. And my opponent plays queen to f5. You can pause the video right now and try to find the winning move I played here, because in this position, I am winning. And careful I didn't miss it. Chess is very complicated. Here, the engines say, that the only move that saves is this one here, bishop to f5, giving up all the attack we had on this. Of course, all of this is extremely difficult, right? My opponent plays a more logical move, which is queen to f5, putting pressure on this point. On the next move, they're going to capture from this point with the rook, right? I can't defend it with any tease. This looks wonderful. Are you ready? Here, the move I played is d takes c6. An absolutely brilliant move. Double exclamation mark. Sacrificing the queen. Careful, if they don't take the queen, I have an extra piece because I just captured a knight. That is, here against any move, for example, bishop takes. Careful, they're threatening mate in some cases, and I move the queen away. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and nothing happens here. I have an extra knight, so my opponent decided to go for it and capture my queen. There was no other choice if they wanted to survive. Capture my queen. But, now I'm completely winning here. Chess games are beautiful, aren't they, friends? Here, I simply capture the pawn on b7 with check. If my opponent goes to b8, bishop takes h7 and promotes to a queen. Because look, after king to b8, bishop takes h7, they have to play king takes a7, and then b8 equals queen, defended by the rook. The king has to move. This would end in checkmate. And if not, at the very least, I capture this rook and have an extra piece and a rook. So they can't go to b8. I promote to a queen with check. So here I'm completely winning. So they have to go to d7 unless I don't promote with check. If I promote here, I lose the game. If I promote, I lose the game, my friends. Why? Because if I promote, they play rook takes f1, and bishop takes knight. And I can't avoid pawn takes and checkmate. And if I don't capture, they'll take and end up checkmating anyway. So I can't promote to a queen at all. I absolutely have to make this move. Very important. Rook takes rook. Check. Very important. I have to play very carefully from now on. Let's analyze all the possible variations. If they go back, I promote with check, so they can't go back. If they go here or here, well, they can't go here because of the rook. But here or here, I play knight to d4 check and win the queen. So they can't go forward or backward. The only move is king to e7. My opponent finds it fantastic. And now what? Well, now after thinking for a few minutes, because I wanted to make sure everything was covered, since, watch out, my opponent is threatening mate, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, checkmate. That's it. So I had to be very careful. I couldn't waste any time. But here, once I calculated everything, I saw that b8 equals queen was completely winning. Why? Because now, no matter how much he captures my knight, which is his only hope of winning, and if I don't play precisely now, he's going to check me, move his bishop away, and checkmate me with the queen. So it's absolutely crucial not to stop giving checks. So I calculated, queen d8 doesn't win. Winning is queen takes c7. He can't go to the back rank because I checkmate him, and he can't move here or it's mate. So he absolutely has to go to f6. A really good move by my opponent. But even so, here, I bring in the rook, he sacrifices his queen. Perfect. I take it, and nothing has happened here. And then I take the bishop too. So the only move is to come here. And so here I was thinking, well, if I bring in the rook, he can block, but then I could capture here. If he leaves, I have mate over here. But this all seemed really complicated. So I found a very simple mate in two here. And the mate in two was the following. d5 check. The king is forced to go here. There's no other option because of the bishop. And then simply queen to d4 was checkmate. Don't tell me this game isn't worth studying again and enjoying here on the channel, because honestly, I had a really tough and really great time at the same time. It depended on the moment in the game. As you can see, this is what chess games are like. Sometimes you feel like you're under pressure, and suddenly you're the one putting on the pressure. That's the beautiful thing about chess games, right? What did you think of this one? Well, if you want to train with the app I use, I always tell you, I know I'm a bit annoying. Chessteacher, shut up already. I only care about your games. The thing is, the app I use is exceptionally helpful and effective because you can thoroughly practice various chess openings. They have free opening courses, and that's why I like it so much. As always, I'll leave it for you down below in the description. It's the app developed by Grandmaster Mauricio Flores. It's completely free, and then there are paid plans for those who want more. But don't worry, you can use it for free. So if you enjoyed this game and this video, as always, I'll see you tomorrow in the next one, friends. Goodbye.